We are back in our city builder to add one last animation. We already have the pedestrians moving about, but I also want to have some vehicles moving about. And it would be interesting if they moved in slightly different speeds in different directions. And I don't want them to start moving at the very start of the play. Um, so we have some control panels that's going to allow us to start the cars. And I want the option to show them moving at different speeds. So I have a fast button to change their speed to fast. And then I have a slow button to change their speeds to very, very slow. Not quite as slow as pedestrians, but definitely slower. So let's take a look at how we can do that in code. Okay, we're going to go to the TypeScript lesson 3 of your script. And we are going to start off by setting up some variables. So we want the car speed to be changeable. But let's just start off by creating a variable. And we'll start off by giving it a value of 10. Once we get the animation going, then we'll come and modify this a little bit. But I do know that I want a variable to hold my car speed. The next thing I'm going to want is I'm going to want to respond to an event. And notice that we didn't have our cars starting at the beginning of our animation. We waited till the start button was pressed. So I need to be able to get to my start button on this control panel. And so let's grab the object ID so we can create our object. So I want to respond to this start button. But again, we are going to respond by getting our bus to move. And instead of trying to find my bus in the environment, I'm just going to go to my object browser and search for it. There it is. I can come and grab the code for bus. And then let's actually find the path that he's going to move on. So there's a couple of car paths on here already. So let's grab one of those. Okay, that is the minimum number of variables I need to get something to happen. But the main point of this lesson is to start understanding how to handle events. And when I mean event, I mean an event in the browser initiated by the user. So an event, more generically, is a signal that's fired that notifies us that changes have happened in the browser. And we often represent a user interaction with events. And this is also known as user input. Previously, user input was us asking the user for something like a name, and they would respond with a text. But now in a Windows environment, user input can be all these interactions with the mouse and keyboard. So the programmer can respond to events by changing attributes or behaviors. And what I mean by behaviors, I mean it can create steps or it can create more actions to happen in the environment. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So now that I have all the variables I need, the first thing I can do is respond to my start button click. Okay, so when I click start button, I can find events by typing the word on, because most of my events will start with the word on, and it'll give me some options. Well, I'm not looking for events such as collision enter or collision exit, so that's not where I need to look for the click event. I'm also going to look under input because events on objects are inputs. And here I get another list of events, and I'm looking for that on click. So I'm going to finish off that IntelliSense. And it is a function call. The argument to this function call is going to be the set of statements that I wanted to execute. But usually when I specify a set of statements, it is in the definition of the function. But I don't have to create a formal function to pass to this on-click event. I'm going to use something called a Lambda expression. And that Lambda expression will define behavior with a list of statements without having to define a function. And this is what it looks like. I do have to have an argument list. In this case, it's an empty argument. I'm going to use what's called a Lambda declaration operator. And then I'm going to specify those statements to execute, or the body of this function. Because this function doesn't have a name, it's sometimes called an anonymous function. But it's still going to have a set of statements just like any other function. And in this case, I do want something to happen when someone clicks on the start button. I want the bus to start moving. So let's go to the bus. Transition and move on path. And the move on path takes a JSON object, and that JSON object wants the path, which is my car path. It wants the speed, which is going to be the car speed variable that I've already set up. And I do want it to turn as it turns on the path, and I do want it to repeat. Okay, that's enough for something to happen. So let's try that out. Okay, the bus is sitting still at the back of the city, but when I come up and click on this start button, then it starts moving along the path. Okay, but nothing else happens because I haven't programmed any of these other buttons. So the interesting thing is when I click on this start button again, it starts to move faster, which wasn't really intended. So I am going to add one more statement here. Every time I click on the start button, I do want to stop whatever the current transition is so that it can start over. Okay, now if I press start and I press it again, it just starts back where I wanted to start and doesn't do that odd behavior. Okay, now we want to keep practicing using these event handlers, but we're going to use it for these other buttons. So let's come back and add some more variables. I want this slow button. So let's create another object for the slow button. And now, since I'm going to work with multiple speeds, instead of my car speed just being set to 10, I'm going to create some constants so I know what slow is. And I'll change normal to be 10 so that car speed can be initialized to normal. And let's go ahead and put a fast speed. Okay, so when somebody clicks on the slow button, I'm just going to have another event for slow button that's going to respond to its on-click event, and I'm going to give it an event handler, which is my Lambda expression. It doesn't take any arguments. It needs that Lambda declaration operator, and then the body of my anonymous function. But this is going to be doing something much simpler. It's just going to change the car speed to slow. And it's that constant slow. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so I click the start button. It moves the bus. I click slow. Nothing's happened yet. But then when I come back and click start, the bus is moving much slower. Okay, that might be a little hard to distinguish. Let's try the fast as well, and then we can see a little bit more difference. So let's add our fast button. And we're going to respond to the fast buttons on click event with a Lambda expression. And now the car speed is going to be fast. Okay, and when I test that, there's my normal speed. Now I'm going to click on fast. And when I click on start, that is much, much faster. Okay, so I didn't program the normal button yet, but we do want the normal button. And that'll allow us to reset it back to its default speed. There's my Lambda expression, and now the car speed is normal. Okay, to finish off this program, have more than just the bus moving along the path, and then have some of the other vehicles move on the alternative path, possibly in opposite directions.